Here I am at Wapiti Nordic Center. Welcome Parkside. So we're going to be going for a walk through the forest today. So it's important when you're walking through the forest that you leave only footprints so that you're taking any garbage, anything you bring with you, you're taking out. Make sure that your pets are on a leash, just like Hallie there. If you're, barbecuing hot dogs, having a fire pit, make sure you're putting out your fire and keeping your distance. Don't feed, disturb wildlife. You want to make sure that you're prepared. You can see Lee has a backpack there. You have some water, sturdy shoes, nice sneakers, some snacks, wearing hat, sunscreen, bug spray as well. So in a forest, you're going to see deciduous or coniferous trees. So a deciduous tree has leaves. Now the leaves come off in the fall. You probably see them fall to the ground, and needles stay on the tree. Coniferous, so kind of starts with the word cone, also has pine cones, spruce cones, so that's another feature. You can see the difference here, the leaves versus needles. Okay. Now there is one tree, the tamarack tree, that actually, or the larch, that actually has needles, but they fall off in the fall. So they're kind of both deciduous and coniferous, so they're unique. Now, in order to tell how old a tree is, you need to look at a cross section of the trunk. Okay, and you count the rings. You can see on this cross section here, you can see the little rings going around. So you would need to count those to see how old the tree is. One thing that you can see, the little dark spots there? So that's when it's dormant in the winter, then it has a growth period. So that's how you know how old a tree is.
Show them the doggy one too.
Yeah, so Brooke found some pretty cool big logs over here as well. Looks like they've been cleaning out the forest, maybe getting rid of the dead ones. She thinks this kind of looks like a dog face there. Pretty unique. And so here you can definitely see the rings growing out. You can see, I would say the optimal year of growth would probably be this one. You can see the ring is just further apart than the other ones. So that year it looks like it was a good year for growth. You can see towards the end, I'm going to guess that this was impacted by insects possibly. The fact that towards the edge, it's just not looking as healthy, is it? Hey, something I can tell with these trunks is there's a bit of a blue tinge to the edge of the cross section here. So that's evidence that these have been impacted by pine beetle or spruce beetle. Okay, that is a sign that they have dug their way in there and impacted the tree. That was obviously a negative. We don't want these beetles eating away at our trees and killing our trees. However, there was a little bit of a positive. People actually kind of liked the blue wood. It would make coffee tables and furniture out of it. So there's a couple of interesting things we can look at here. This one's unique. You can see that this is the middle of the tree here, and it grew out more in this direction than the other direction. So it grew on a slope. Let's see if I can find a better one. Okay, this one here is really good. Okay, so you can see that this is actually the middle. You would start counting the rings from here. On this side, there must have been either competition, like maybe another tree, that prevented it growing on this side. It could have been concrete, might have been growing on a slope, so the tree couldn't grow in that direction and grew further out into this direction. There's another example there. So there you go. You got signs of spruce beetle. You got trees growing on a slope or one direction here. Very interesting. They tell a lot. Tree cross sections tell a lot about the life of a tree, also about the environment, and also about the weather. So let's see if I can find one over here. So you can actually look to see when there was optimal growth. So optimal growth is when there's a good mix of water, sun, didn't rain too much, wasn't too hot, and you can see there would be wider rings on the tree. This one has some insect infestation. See very clearly there. You can also see, this year was probably a good year for growth, how wide the ring is. This here is an example of how the tree may have been impacted by fire. You can see the brown looks like a burn in that tree cookie. You can also see here there's quite a wide part here, so that would have been an optimal year of growth for this tree. So again, how tree cookies, the cross section of a tree, can tell us so much. Okay, here you can see the new growth. This looks like a spruce tree. You can see the short needles there and clearly see the new growth for this year, the light green. So this is an example of the Alberta wild rose. You probably see it out and about. It is actually our provincial flower, Alberta's provincial flower. So indigenous cultures use the roots for ointment for sore eyes and the wood for arrows. And rose hips is also comes from this plant, and it's used in tea for different benefits. All right, so here is an example of a wild strawberry. See those white flowers there? So strawberries are actually an example of runner plants. So they grow along the ground, and you can see them spreading out there. You can see all the stems coming out along the ground. Okay, so they can be propagated. You just take some of those stems and grow new strawberry plants. Other ways you can propagate plants without using seeds are by using stem cuttings, runners like this, tubers. So an example is a potato. Another example of a runner is a spider plant. It's nothing like walking through the forest. So you guys see here the green stuff hanging from the branches? So that's called old man's beard, and that's a type of lichen. So it's an organism that arises from algae and fungus, and they live in a symbiotic relationship, which means they help each other. Now you probably don't know this, but lichen are actually really important. First of all, they do add a lot of character to our forest, and different ones around the world, if you can get different lichen depending on where the forest is. They help algae survive in harsh environments. So, Grande Prairie is in a drought. It has been in the drought for quite a while now. I think someone told me about 6 years. So it helps the algae survive in this environment, this dry environment. Lichen also converts carbon dioxide into oxygen that we breathe through a process called photosynthesis. And it also absorbs everything in the atmosphere, pollutants. So any pollution in our air caused by factories and cars, it can actually absorb them and make our air cleaner. So we're very lucky to have lichen, and who would have thought? And there is another example of lichen just here. You can see the green covering on the ground here. So that's an example of reindeer moss. So there's a possibility that this is Labrador tea. So Labrador tea, they're little white flowers in clusters with 5 petals. Labrador tea is used for medicine, making tea, and is high in vitamin C. Here's an example of a lodgepole pine. So this is the Alberta's official provincial tree as of 1984. So you can see that the branches are turning up. The bark is like an orange brown, somewhat scaly. The leaves and needles shape in bundles of 2. The cones are short silico to egg shaped. So those are really important pines in Alberta. You can see that the pine tree has a longer needle, and the jack pine could be a jack pine. This one isn't a jack pine, but jack pines also have longer needles. Spruce and tamaracks and balsam firs, they have shorter needles. Over here you can see a really nice, healthy, I'm guessing a spruce. It's got lots of new growth, but you can also tell around it, it doesn't have a lot of competition. So trees are healthier when they don't have a lot of competition. You can see the ones back there growing up tall. They have more competition around them, so they don't look as healthy as this one here.
Okay, so we remember there's multiple kinds of wetlands you might find in northern Alberta. You might find like a marsh, you might find a bog, there's swamps around, there's another wetland known as a fen. If we look at this wetland out here, we'll notice that it's wet. That's why it's called a wetland. The water's coming right up here close to us, but it's full of grass. So if this had been a bog, it would have been like full of moss and stuff. And if it was a swamp, it'd be full of trees, but I see trees around the outside, but if you look in the middle, all that's out there is grasses. So this is a marsh. We might find tadpoles, frogs, lots of insect larvae. There's heaps of mosquitoes around here causing some trouble. Moose like it in a marsh. So you might see a moose. They like to eat the plants that are growing in here. And the marsh.
Here is an example of a wetland. So a wetland is land that is wet for some or all of the year. So it could just be for a short amount of time. It could be for the whole time, permanently wet. So wetlands are actually really important. They filter the pollutants. So any fertilizer that's used on farms can run into the wetland, and they actually filter out those pollutants to create a cleaner water. They are an important habitat for animals. So moose can be found here, fungi, beavers, lots of mosquitoes, muskrat, birds, and they also hold water. So that is really important during a flood. So during a flood, water will congregate to this one area. And also during a drought, this will be a source of water for animals. So different wetlands you might have heard of. Marsh. This is a marsh. Due to the grassy area, it has some cattails in the middle there. The other one's a fen, bog, swamps. So some animals that we may find near a wetland are also frogs. Erin, can you tell us a little bit about frogs and toads?
Okay, so toads, they lay their eggs in a chain. So if you see eggs, they're like one egg and then another egg underneath it. They're probably toad eggs, while frogs, they lay their eggs in clusters. And frogs also have more slimy skin, while toads' skin is dry and warty. Another difference between frogs and toads are that toads like to crawl rather than jump or hop, while frogs are more likely to hop. Toads also travel more inland, while frogs stay closer to the water or in the water. Thank you.
Thanks. I found another wetland here. This is a swamp because it has trees growing from it. Again, it probably dries out later in the summertime and isn't as wet later, but it is still considered a wetland. Hey guys, I wanted to show you a little close-up of this. I think it's a spruce, possibly. So you can see that some of the pines, needles, are a little lighter than others, so that's new growth for this year. So you can see here this tree's doing pretty well, and you can see that it doesn't have a lot of competition for space. It's looking nice and healthy compared to a lot of the trees around it. There you go. Come across some flowers in this little bit of a wetland here. So a flower is the part that produces seeds. Now seeds, they can actually travel. So seeds travel in a variety of ways. They can travel by air. They can travel by scat. So if an animal was to eat some berries, they would then travel and go along their way. And when they go number 2 somewhere, the seeds then come out. And so that's one way that seeds can travel. They travel by air, by water. They can also stick to animals. So I know sometimes where you have to take all the little seeds off hallie. So seeds will attach onto maybe people's feet or animals' fur and travel that way too. In northern Alberta, the growing season for the trees are quite short. So even though we tell the age of a tree by looking at the tree cookies and counting the rings will be closer in Alberta than they would be elsewhere. However, we have quite a thriving forestry industry in northern Alberta, and that's because those really close rings make for very strong wood, for hardwood. And that's really useful for paper towel and toilet paper because we want it to be strong and we don't want it to fall apart easily. Hey guys, here's some examples of some pine cones. So pine cones are not actually seeds. They do encase seeds, and they require high temperatures in order to open and disperse those seeds. Okay, so actually wildfires are actually good for the forest to kind of regenerate and start over, kind of burn off the dead trees and be able to start new ones. So I know that wildfires are scary for people, but in some places they actually do controlled wildfires so that there's a new regeneration and things kind of keep being healthy in the forest. So I just wanted to show you a little bit. This is nice wide open space. See, we have some healthy trees growing. We have lots of new deciduous trees. You can hear the birds. Look how green it is compared to other areas we've looked at today. They're a little wetter, trees that have more competition. Maybe nutrients in the soil aren't as strong. Oh, listen to that. One interesting thing that you may not be aware is that trees can actually be really relaxing to people. So research has shown that if people are sick in the hospital and they have a brick wall to look at, they don't get as well as fast as people in hospital that have trees to look at. So pretty cool research there that shows how the forest and trees and plants are just so important to humans. Not just for, wood to build our homes, not just for food, but for our mental health as well. And especially now, I know it is so therapeutic and so important to get out, get fresh air, walk, see trees, do some gardening. So in comparison to the video I just showed you out in the open, healthy trees, here is a stark contrast. So, I only walked 10 meters down the trail here, and it's very different. You can see there are a lot more trees, so there's a lot more competition for resources, nutrients, sunshine. You can see it's a little greener up there. So, you know, there's going to be different plant varieties, different types of trees, depending on the soil. I also know this kind of gets a little swampy in here in the springtime, wet. See the moss growing, lots of dead trees falling. So we definitely do get different plants depending on the environment, the number of trees. Oh, here we have an example of where there might be insect or animal. I'm going to guess this could be a porcupine. Okay, the way that it's come across and scratched away the bark to catch bugs and such. Okay, here's a deciduous branch here. I just wanted to show you a little bit. So the notch there, the very end there, that is the terminal bud. And you can actually tell the growth of a branch by looking for these little notches. So that's where the terminal bud was at one time. Here's another time. There would be another one. So you can actually look at a branch and tell the growth year to year as you go up, looking for those little notches. Hey Parkside, so thanks for going on a walk through the forest with me today. The good thing about doing this virtually is you guys didn't get eaten by mosquitoes like we did, even without bug spray on. So make sure that you're prepared, have fun, and go and explore.